Well, good evening, everyone. So for a topic this evening, I want to think about the word stewardship, and think about what stewardship means and how it looks, and maybe look at some examples in the Bible. See if we can learn some things about how to be a good steward. The Bible talks about being a good steward, talks about stewardship a little bit. The verse that is kind of the verse that I think describes some of my thoughts pretty well is found in Psalms chapter 24, verse 1. It says, "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein." So if we think about all the things that we have, if you just let your mind wander, think about all the things that you have, your time and your health, perhaps the things you have, things that you can touch and feel, and think about whose they really are, or where you got them, who gave them to you, and how we're responsible for what we do with these things. So the word stewardship simply means the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. So as you think about that, the question that came to my mind is, are we stewards? Am I a steward of something? Are you a steward of something? Does anyone care to answer that question? Do any of us have anything? Are we stewards?
Like it or not, we are.
Right. It's not a trick question. It's something that all of us are. We're stewards. We have things. So thinking about the answer to that question, that brings up another question. How did we become stewards? How did this happen? Who made us responsible for things, the things that we have? By our parents? Okay. Is there a better answer to that question? What? Right. Yeah, that's the answer I was looking for. Let's just turn to Genesis in chapter 1. Verse 24. I thought about this in relation to what we have and how we're responsible for what we do with what we have. And I thought, how did we become stewards? And in Genesis chapter 1, verse 24, it says, "And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and the beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his image, in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." So I think this started back in creation. You think about all the things that God created, mankind, made in his own image, was the only thing that he gave, or the only part of his creation that he gave this mind to, the ability to reason and think. And with that, he gave us a responsibility that we're to have dominion over all these things. And so God made us stewards of what he created. What things come to your mind when you think of what do we have that requires our stewardship? Anyone? Time. That's a good one. Any more?
Our children.
Mm-hmm.
Abilities.
Our abilities.
Other relationships as well.
Money would be another one. That's something that probably all of us have at least a little of, some more than others. But yeah, we all have all of those things. You can turn to Matthew chapter 6. There's some scripture I want to read here. What does God say about how we relate to our things, the things that we have? My mind was mostly thinking about the things we touch and feel, the things we deal with every day, our possessions, our money, things like that. That's where my focus was. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." What are these verses telling us? Is there anything that stands out to you in these verses?
Any so-called treasure here on earth is very short-lived, very fleeting, very temporary.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have a thought on these verses?
Verse 21 always reminded me that we'll have time for whatever we want to do in life. What you take time for pretty well tells everybody what's in your life.
Okay. Very good.
Looks like if we're not good stewards, it's something that could get taken away.
Mm-hmm. The part that caught my eye about these verses is the don't part. It says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth." I had to think about this thing of focus, what you're focused on, and that was brought out a little bit there. Laying up for yourselves treasures upon earth, that requires our attention, that requires our focus. And so if that's what we're going after, it looks like our heart's going to follow that, according to verse 21. Is there any thoughts on why we have this problem? Why are these verses here? They're here for a reason, but why? Why do we have this problem of treasuring the things around us too much? Is there any thoughts on that?
Because that's part of humanity. It's just simply natural.
Since the fall, we've been selfish.
If the devil can get our mind off of heavenly things and distract us from heavenly things, he will use our mind to distract us away from God and into his path of evilness.
Very good thoughts there. I had to think of, where our focus is, and it's something that we do every day. The simple thing of driving down the road. If you look too long at something off to the side, why, you'll probably end up there if you don't, bring your focus back to the middle of the road. It just kind of works that way, and it works the same way with the things that we have around us, our possessions, our money, whatever's, I guess, precious to you. I don't know if that's quite the right way of saying it, but our treasures, I guess, would be one way of saying it. Those things we tend to get too attached to, and we're born with that selfish desire, that selfishness within us, and it gets us in trouble with the things that we have. It tries to steal our focus away from God. I had to think, is it not pride too that causes this problem? How we appear to other people. No one likes to be looked at by others as a failure. But why are we so concerned about other people's opinions of us regarding our things when they look and see what we have? Do we want other people to think, are we more concerned about other people thinking well of us and thinking that we have it made, that we forget that God is calling us to a higher standard of simply using what we have to honor Him and not draw attention to ourselves? Are we more concerned about appearing successful to people around us than being a good steward for God? I think that's something that, I know it's something I deal with, and I don't think I'm too much different than most of you. I had to think about someone else in the Bible. You can turn to Matthew chapter 19. And verse 16. It says, "And behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? And he said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. But if thou wilt enter into life, keep the commandments. He saith unto him, Which? Jesus said, Thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, Thou shalt not bear false witness. Honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. The young man saith unto him, All these things have I kept from my youth up. What lack I yet? And Jesus said unto him, If thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. But when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Is there any thoughts on this problem that this young man had? What comes to your mind when you think about him and his possessions?
Well, he had to weigh the cost of what Jesus said, and found it too heavy. Didn't want to give up what was asked of him. And so he walked away, and he kept his possessions, and you don't know the end of it all. He did walk away from Jesus.
It reminds me of the account of the rich man and Lazarus. When Lazarus was there by his table and didn't meet the needs of that hungry beggar. Which that's what Jesus is bringing out here also, is to meet the needs of those around him.
I think part of his problem was in verse 20 and how he saw himself. He says, I've done everything that you said. What more do I need?
He was pretty good,
He didn't
wasn't
think
he?
he lacked anything.
Yeah.
If he wasn't willing to obey God in the flesh, what does that say about his claimed obedience to the other commands?
It's a good point. Part that stood out to me in these verses, I had to think about how empty this young man's life was. How much the things around him meant to him, and it seemed like that's where he found his identity, I guess. It says he had great possessions. And I had to think, too, he was probably the envy of a lot of people around him. It says he had great possessions. He probably stood out from the crowd as one of the wealthier ones. And, as other people were around him and saw what he had, a lot of people probably thought that, he's got it made. He's got it figured out. And yet, somehow, he missed the bigger picture of what life really was about. And he simply couldn't give up the things that meant so much to him, all of his possessions, his wealth, his things, his money. Let's turn to Luke 15. There's another account here of the prodigal son. We're not going to spend just a lot of time here, but I had to think about how much potential this young man had, this younger son. asking his father for his part of the inheritance and then just taking it and just simply blowing it. The time and the energy and the money that he wasted just, I guess, living it up. The contrast here, though, is his father, when he's returning, thinking about our time. His father was obviously watching for him, and he wanted his son back, and he had at least some faith that he would come back. And you think about everything that his son wasted, and yet his father was still there and showed him a good example of what good stewardship actually was, simply by using his time that he could have been doing probably so many other things, and yet he was watching for the return of his son. I suppose that probably went a long way in this young man's life as he thought about how wasteful he had been, and how, in contrast, how his father was spending and using his time watching for him to return. Another thing that came to my mind as I thought about stewardship and how we use the things that God's given us, in the small things of life that we have. God notices how we do with small things. Good stewardship starts not after we've reached a certain goal, a certain, dollar amount in our bank account or something, anything like that. Good stewardship starts with what we have today. Even if it's a small amount, even if it's less than most people have, God notices how well we do with the small things that we have. Had to think about sometimes a person might set a goal, they'll start giving when they have $1,000 to their name, or, they'll do this when they have $100,000, or, once I get to this point where I'm rich, then I'll do something. But it usually doesn't work that way. Usually we're the same person that we are with a small amount. That's who we'll be when we have a large amount that we're responsible for. The way we practice stewardship, or the lack of stewardship with small things, is exactly how we'll be when we have a large amount of things. God is looking for an unselfish heart, no matter how little or how much we have, and no matter where we find ourselves. God's looking for good stewardship in us and an unselfish heart. In closing, coming back to Psalm chapter 24, verse 1 again, says, "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein." Just wanted to remind us again that everything that we have is God's, and it was given to us by God. And He wants us to honor Him with what we have, our time, our money, our possessions, things that are precious to us. He's looking for us to honor Him and be good stewards with what He's given us, whether it's much or whether it's little.